Hello, Ryan here, aka Mac, and welcome. We have the latest Squadron 42 monthly report, so let us break it down today. As always, a huge thank you to all of my patrons and channel members. Thank you so much for the support, it is truly appreciated, and if you do enjoy my content, please do consider subscribing and helping the channel to grow. So, kicking off with the AI content team, they progressed with their remaining medical behavior tasks, and now the full medical flow can be demonstrated in the behavior test map with additional animation variations for interacting with cupboards, beds, trays, and sinks, both with or without holding a datapad, were created, and it says once signed off, they will be implemented into the Stanton and Krugeri's infirmaries. Now, this is the first time I'm seeing the name Krugeri, and I don't know if this is referring to the OMC gang infirmary or something else, as it was mentioned later on in the report, so we'll get back to that. But also, we do know that the Stanton infirmary is the Idris that you're stationed on. Now, the team also continued to work on the Fight Club caged arena, implementing the entry bouncer and rush animations for crowd spectators. And for these spectators, the crowd's intensity varies pre, mid, and post-fight, and as part of this, the speed quality fight animations were developed with data from a recent mocap shoot. Now, it'll be very interesting to see how this Fight Club comes into the storyline. I'm guessing it's something to do with the OMC gang, perhaps. Maybe we infiltrate their hideout and see this in the background. I don't know. So the team also worked on speed-processed locomotion animations for NPCs experiencing severe pain, which involved implementing animations for characters standing and moving while exhibiting sickness. They also worked on polishing animations for inebriated NPC movement and for these NPCs holding cups. And finally, for the AI content team, they implemented Mobiglass and Datapad overlay locomotion animations to allow characters to seamlessly interact with digital interfaces. Now, moving on to the AI features team, they continued to work on the Buddy AI, and they say that now buddies cheat when finding supplies, looting ammunition that doesn't match their current weapon, and they can also fully restock when they do so, replenishing their grenades and med pens. Now, it's quite funny hearing this. When I first heard it, I think, oh no, they're faking things or cheating things. That's not good. But I guess for the sake of a single player campaign, the buddy having access to what they need to aid the player is going to be quite important, rather than the buddy running out of ammunition and becoming completely useless. Although I would definitely prefer them, or the idea of them having to find a weapon from a downed NPC, take that and the ammunition. But I can't imagine them faking or cheating this system for the PU. I think NPCs are intended to be constrained just as much as the player is. Now, the team also finished the first pass of a boss fight that challenges players to counter or block before they can attack, while progress was also made on the targeting and melee attacks for a key enemy behavior. And the team also implemented the core components of systemic and boss fight sniper functionality, enabling the designers to finish it off and provide feedback. And if I'm honest, I was hoping Squadron wouldn't really take the traditional route of a boss fight, as it always annoys me in games, getting to a final boss of a level and having to rinse repeat actions or memorize patterns just to get through it. I do hope that they're more interesting in Squadron than traditional games that reward logic and skill, but we'll have to wait and see. Finally, for the team, they wrapped up the performance capture for various features and implemented the full animation set for a collection of characters with a unique combat style. Pretty interesting. Now, for the AI tech team, it says they progressed with their final major Squadron 42 features and addressed feedback on older initiatives. Now, it is very exciting and also very promising hearing from teams that they are onto their final pieces of work for Squadron. And it's not the last time we'll hear about that in this report, but this means that we will slowly begin to see certain teams complete their work on this campaign and then likely transition over to the persistent universe. But more importantly, it does mean that Squadron is coming closer to completion. And I am sure that over the course of this year and likely into next, we will see more and more teams finish up with this project and move on to the PU. Now, the AI tech team also continued to improve the collision avoidance system to give better results when ground vehicles pass each other or NPCs, as well as adding support for driving along a predefined route, similar to how NPCs can move along a path now. And for this case, the designers can specify certain properties for the route, like maximum permitted speed, which direction they should be driving in, and if it should loop. So quite interesting hearing this, as I'm sure for Squadron there are some very specific use cases for this behaviour and ability, but for the PU, it can be used for racing NPCs in ground races, convoys, or driving on a planet in general, and also for roads, when we finally get them in cities or other planetside locations. Now, work began on a dynamic pathfinding regeneration feature to improve how NPCs find and follow alternate routes, and for example, if a hazard like a fallen tree, a vehicle stopping, or fire impacting the navigation mesh triangle, the volume will notify all related paths and check if new requires are submitted. So again, just like I mentioned before, applicable to so many areas for ground vehicle transit. Now, the team began investigating and implementing a solution for NPCs entering and exiting ships from EVA using the external doors of an airlock system. Hopefully, they'll have a better time than us in the PU right now. And I do bet that they are using this new EVA system, whereas we are not. But it says for this, they set up ship and seat access as a usable to allow NPCs to find their closest entry position, fly to it, and trigger the right interaction. And they also had to account for the ship's rotational velocity and also NPCs to adjust their orientation as they approach. So sounds pretty complicated, but of course NPCs need to be able to navigate all areas of the game just like the players can. And then finally, on the AI tools side, improvements continued for both the usable coordinator and Apollo subsumption assignments to help designers create scripted AI behaviors. Now, for the AI vehicle features team, they progressed with their ongoing rework of combat AI, with them hooking up various events for the AI to react to across the game. And it says this is the final step before integrating the new combat AI into all encounters across Squadron 42, with the team saying, after that, it's playtesting over and over again in situ in the levels of the game, so we can judge and adjust difficulty, pacing, and so on to fine-tune the experience. So again, very exciting to hear that another final step of work is getting implemented. Of course, there will still be plenty of testing to follow, but not only does it mean Squadron is getting much closer to completion, as mentioned before, but all of this stuff will be a huge part of the persistent universe once it has been through that testing, and of course we will see it once the AI in the persistent universe are not affected by the servers. So it sounds like they will be all kinds of capable. Now, the team also improved the logic for how AI ships join splines to make it smoother and more natural looking, and splines are just generated paths for the ships to fly along. And finally, for the AI vehicle features team, ground avoidance during atmospheric flight was also worked on, with the aim to have the AI try their best to not collide with the ground when in combat while behaving as natural as possible. It would certainly be good if the AI could at least have some sense of self-preservation. Now, moving on to the animation team, they worked on various skill level based takedowns, movement in 0G, and swimming. So skill level based takedowns are either referring to NPCs performing takedowns, as NPCs do have skill trees and levels, or it is more likely relating to this underlying animation change that we will see our characters go through as we perform certain actions more. So instead of a takedown looking cumbersome the first time you perform one, after a while your character will look more and more capable and smooth. However, skill in attaining a takedown will remain the same. But also, it is great hearing that swimming is coming along. Now, the team also continued creating assets for background actions to give life to various locations, which will continue as levels are playtested. And again, hearing that levels are being playtested means the core bulk of the gameplay is in and working, and now it is more a case of set dressing, polishing, and refining the background elements to ensure that it's as spectacular as it can be. It also says a second enemy class animation style was developed, alongside a knife fight and a melee enemy class as well, while the team continued to create assets for the various behavior lines and wild lines for both combat and non-combat AI. And finally, for animation, the mocap team spent the majority of the month shooting performances and delivering data for gameplay and cinematics. So, moving on to the gameplay features team, last month they updated the character customizer, which included adding a new sculpting mode that allows players to select and drag an anchor point on the face to change the size and shape of a particular facial zone, such as the nose, ear, and chin. Now, this sounds like it will offer much deeper customization options. However, CIG have stated in the past that they don't want players to create characters that look too extreme. Think along the lines of Ark Survival, for example, as they want things to remain immersive. So do expect a good balance between further customization for more detailed faces, but not to the point of ridiculousness. Also, further detailing work was done on the firing range, mostly around joining and leaving, with feedback also actioned on the UI to integrate it better into the environment. And I believe the firing range is found on the Stanton Idris, opposite the Quartermaster or the Master-at-Arms character. Now, a new collectible was created that players will be able to find, pick up, and stow during gameplay, and these items, they say, will then populate the player's quarters as part of the collectible system. Now, I do love the sound of this, and more single-player games seem to do this nowadays, finding items on your travels or throughout a mission to display in your private quarters, and hopefully we will be able to bring these items that we find in Squadron into the persistent universe and place them on display in our homes, ships, or hangars. I do believe that is the intention, as they have said that these will make great talking points and nostalgic items. Now, the front end also received a new difficulty option. This, they say, exposes various modifiers to the AI, health, and weapon attributes to allow the design team to balance the game depending on the player's desired experience. And so again, something like difficulty options, you would only really create when all of the possible AI behaviors and abilities are implemented or more refined and set up. So a great sign that Squadron is getting closer and closer to completion. Now, a new feature to allow the designers to create and save damage maps was created as well, which enables them to apply pre-damaged areas to ships. And following on from the recent star map work, which we heard recently that the star map was implemented into the Squadron 42 branch, the gameplay features team is now developing the area map, or the local area map, which will render a holographic view of the player's current environment, either from within the star map or as part of the visor, with markers for players, characters, mission objectives, and more. So very excited to hear that the new maps are coming along. These are fundamental changes for the persistent universe as well that will make life so much better, and hearing that it is now getting developed in Squadron means it's not going to be too long until they make their way into the persistent universe. So, for the vehicle features team, they continued their work on the control surface flight mode, which, if you don't know, means flaps, ailerons, etc., basically making atmospheric flight realistic. The team implemented special handling for ships in gas-filled zero-G locations, such as gas clouds, and while ships will favour thrusters over aerodynamics in these situations, they will experience drag and lift that slightly impact how they feel. And that sounds like such a nice detail, and I look forward to experiencing it. Also, I really hope that we are not waiting too long to get this new flight mode into the persistent universe. Now, the vehicle team also iterated on UI and VFX for communicating the quantum system state and began utilizing in-work visual effects for this purpose, which allowed them to pare back the UI. Now, this, I think, is meaning that as we go through the motion of using our quantum drive, like spooling, activating, engaging, and then the cooling down of this, we will see these stages via VFX, like a quantum bubble building up perhaps, giving us an in-world understanding and representation of what is happening and the stages that you're going through without needing UI cluttering up the screen. So I really love this approach and look forward to seeing how it will feel. A new feature for spawning waves of AI ships inside carriers was kicked off, similar to the FPS spawn closets, and now AI will spawn on landing pads within carriers, take off and join the fight, with this feature potentially being used to support large battles by naturally spawning ships. And I also suspect that this is to aid in performance, and instead of having all the ships always loaded with other ships, they can just spawn them only when needed. Now, the IFCS, or the Intelligent Flight Control System, received updates last month. For example, the team worked on a bespoke relative throttle that allows players to assign a target velocity when the throttle is untouched. Also, various quality of life improvements were made to support this, including a trap for setting target speed to 0, a non-linear rate of change for improved precision at lower speeds, and an improved UI for displaying the throttle. All of this sounds great, but I'm not sure exactly what this will function like in-game, so if someone has an idea of how this will work, please do let me know in the comments, it will be much appreciated. Now, work on the vehicle UI continued, with the team creating a physical hangar terminal for modifying a ship's loadout before missions, and this, they say, enables the player to view an inventory of available weapons and items, compare them against each other, and then equip them to the ship in the hangar. Now, this, I suspect, will be a similar or the same system that we will use in our personal hangars, having the terminal to view our available inventory and vehicles, and then request what we want to be delivered via the freight elevator. But I think for small components, it will be physical for us to pick up and put into our ships, whereas for Squadron, it might just be more of a, you request one of the crew to go and do that for you. Now, finally, for the team, MFDs, or multifunction displays, basically the screens in our ships, received various updates, including a UI pass to make them larger, simpler, and easier to read. Now, the new MFD system also allows players to cast some screens to their visors, with the team changing the layout and aspect ratio of the screens when this occurs. All of this, they say, makes better use of screen space and allows certain elements to be more prominent, and furthermore, after the work last month, MFDs were enabled for wider use in the company. Now, this is pretty big news. Firstly, having more readable MFDs will be great. I also believe that they want to make the MFDs manufacturer specific as well, so Drake obviously having different designs to Aegis and so on. But also the ability to cast screens to our visor will give us more contextual info set up how we want it, utilizing both the MFDs and our helmet visors for more customization. But lastly, the fact that they are now implemented for wider use in the company means it shouldn't be too long until we see these in the burst, as I do believe this means they are not only limited to Squadron 42 testing and can now come to the persistent universe. So great news there. And that is a system that we have been needing updated for a long while. Okay, so moving on to the gameplay story team, they worked on various scenes involving the Stanton's quartermaster, and these updates were requested by design with the goal of getting the scenes to integrate properly with the AI behavior. Also, new mocap data was used to update some significant scenes in the medbay, ensuring characters interact correctly with the latest swiveling chair, with the team saying it was great to see the scenes updated to use exactly the same setup as the AI, which should make the scenes very robust and future-proof. They also began setting up 8 new scenes, bringing their total to 290, and finally the team continued to set up operator seats, working to establish proper metrics and solid foundations for these complicated assets. Also, automated testing of the entities achieved a 100% pass rate, so they can now move on to reviewing, improving, and approaching the required animations. So very nice hearing that these automated testing tools are doing their thing, helping to speed up development while maintaining that quality control. Now, for the level design team, they focused on 2 main locations, one being the Stanton Idris and the other the Krugeri capital ships. So here again we hear about Krugeri, this time referencing that whoever they are, they have at least 2 capital ships. Could it be a gang? Could it be the Vanduul clan name? Who knows, but I am certainly intrigued. Now, alongside general scene maintenance and bug fixing, they looked into scene handshakes that transition NPCs into their required behaviors, and this involves ensuring that characters are prepped to transition, are pose matched, have holstered held items, and more. They also updated the Stanton's quartermaster scene to reflect the revised AI vendor flow without negatively affecting performance, and the team then continued to work on the AI schedules for the Stanton, which has an 80-person crew, each playing out various behaviours around the ship. Now, moving on to the narrative team, they held a performance capture shoot focusing on additional combat and social wild lines just referring to background dialogue that you kind of hear being spoken or maybe shouted out to suit the situation. The goal, they say, is to capture a wide variety of voices to populate the universe while also maximizing the effectiveness of the content so it remains within a reasonable scope. The team also synced with design on their recent gameplay progress to review adjustments and ensure that dialogue continues to function as intended. And in some instances, the team made suggestions on how the revised gameplay scenarios should better align with the emotional tone of the moment. For example, if a puzzle scenario occurs during a particularly stressful sequence, then they will find ways to maintain the emotional underpinning during the puzzle. Now, this is something that I find is quite often overlooked by games. When you are in the middle of a serious scene, something can be said or something done in the background that doesn't fit properly with that emotion. And although it can be hilarious at times, it certainly does rip you out of the moment. So I'm happy that they are going to this effort. Now finally, for the narrative team, progress continued on the text items needed across the entirety of the game, including collectibles, the Galactopedia entries, and Mobiglash UI elements, and it will be very nice when the Galactopedia is implemented into the persistent universe, being able to read up on the lore or even have it dictated to you while you are travelling from place to place in the verse. That will be great, and the narrative team had said that they want that. Now onto the UI team, they completed their work on modular fluff screens, getting them set up in different UI styles for the various locations, which are now ready to be handed over to the art and FPS teams so they can be added to the levels. Now this, I believe, are just basically irrelevant screens that look like they fit in the location, fleshing out the location's overall visuals, but won't offer any gameplay of any kind. The team also implemented new FPS weapon screens for the different brands within the game, and worked alongside FPS and vehicle teams on AR markers, which are floating UI elements that show players where their objectives and targets are. And with the art now signed off, they are getting prepped for use in-game. And I do hope that they take the full augmented reality route, meaning if we remove our helmets, then the markers are gone. Talking of which, it does say that work on the final visor UI continued, and this will include weapon and ammo information, and notifications and mission objectives, with the team also applying improved shaders from the graphics team to make the UI appear more holographic. So once more, we are hearing about a final piece of work getting done, and this one being another very important feature that, when brought into the persistent universe, should help to expand on the variety and diversity of all helmets and their visors, displaying contextual information based on the helmet type. And I wouldn't be surprised if the UI design is manufacturer specific eventually too, just like we have with these ship hoods. So a Clark's Defense helmet visor HUD being different to that of a different manufacturer. Now finally, the UI tech team continued to improve their tools, including making performance improvements and adding additional ways to debug the more complex scenes. They also further developed the new interior and minimaps, which will bring a significant improvement to in-game navigation. And I really hope that CIG show off these maps at CitizenCon. They are going to be pretty game-changing for the verse, allowing us to properly navigate terrain, locations, as well as leave way markers to return back to. Now lastly, we have the VFX team. They revisited gas cloud tunnels, working closely with art and design to create new hazards that can occur inside the tunnel networks. So that sounds pretty cool. And finally, progress was made on weapon effects. So there you go, that was the monthly report for Squadron 42. Quite the exciting updates, which tells me they are getting very close to getting the game done. Now, I'm not talking this year. I think even if everything was done and it was just down to polishing, playtesting, and balancing, that will take quite a lot of time in itself. More that next year we will likely see this game come to light and hopefully get to the point of release. Now this is obviously just speculation on my part based on what I'm reading here. Of course I could be completely wrong, but either way it is great to hear that certain teams are working on final versions of systems and features, and I suspect that over the course of this year and next year, certain teams will begin to wrap up their work on Squadron and move focus over to the persistent universe. But with that said, I do hope you enjoyed the video. Please do consider subscribing and helping the channel to grow. Also, come and hang out over at twitch.tv/supermacbrother. You are all more than welcome over there. Always a lot of fun discussing the development updates and playing 319. Hit the thumbs up if you don't mind. It does the channel a big favour, and tick that notification bell if you would like to be notified when my videos go live. Again, a huge thank you to my patrons and channel members. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.